Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? I hope the people out in Zoom land can hear me. So I'm very pleased to welcome back to our club, Debra Hall, who presented to us, I believe it was last spring, about the efforts of her efforts and her team's efforts with getting broadband available to everyone in the area. Debra has 40 years of experience as an international corporate, regulatory, and technology attorney. She co-founded and is co-owner of a technology company which holds a US registered patent in the field of artificial intelligence. She's been an advocate for high-speed broadband since 2013, when she led a successful effort to bring fiber optics to 541 homes in Naples, Florida. She's also served in various roles, including chair of the Rockport Select Board, and she's really focused on bringing high-speed internet throughout Rockport and the Midcoast region. As chair of the Midcoast Internet Coalition, which has a dozen municipal members, Debra leads a talented team of leaders, technology consultants, and community members who are passionate about expanding educational and economic opportunities, making telehealth available to seniors, attracting young families, and creating opportunities for a vibrant workforce. In June of this year, Camden and Rockport formed a regional utility district, the Midcoast Internet Development Corporation, or MIDC, soon to be joined by Thomaston and Rockland. As executive director of that utility, Debra is working with a small, energetic team focused on raising private funds and securing grants to build an open access fiber network for every home and business in the Midcoast region. So Debra regards high-speed internet as essential today as any other utility, and we're very happy to have you here, Debra. Tell us about progress being made here. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me back. Okay, thank you for having me back. While John works on pulling up the slides here, thank you. I'd like to acknowledge that we have several people that are on the Zoom who have been working very hard on this project. Kara George, the town manager in Thomaston, Brian Doyle, the economic development director. Who else? Adam Lackman and Chris Rector with Senator King's office. I noticed are also on the Zoom call, and I just want to acknowledge them as having been very valuable to this effort. So I'm not going to take you through broadband and what it is and all that good stuff. And we did a little bit of that the last time I was here. I really want to update you on what's going on with the coalition and the utility district. But I want to get your mindset in fiber for a minute. So we're just going to spend a couple minutes on this. The most important thing about this slide is the fact that I want you to think about upload speed being so important. And that's what we learned during the pandemic, is that it's not just download speed, which is what the telecoms, the cable companies have always given to us in terms of, movies and streaming and all that stuff. But to conduct work, to do telehealth and all of those, education, all those essential activities, you need download speed as well as upload speed as well as download speed. So we call that symmetrical speed, and you'll see references to that here. The FCC still today has a woefully inadequate definition of broadband, which is 25 down and 3 megabits up. And that's just absurd. And anybody who has tried to work from home, has kids from home, and tried to have multiple things going on during the pandemic knows how absurd it is. The Connect Maine Authority, in fact, who also those people tried to work from home and have had kids from home, trying to do education. They acknowledge what a woefully inadequate speed it is, and they recently changed. So they recently changed the, that's what you get for being short, right? They, Connect Maine recently changed the broadband definition in Maine from 25/3 to 50/10. Some of the board members wanted it to be 50/50 symmetrical. Some of them wanted it to be 100/100 symmetrical, as everyone I think acknowledges it should be. But if you take it to where you ultimately want it to be, then there's no distinction, argued some of the board members, about who's worse off than others. So they took it to 50/10, but 50/10 is better than 25/3. And all those numbers become important when we start talking about grant funding. So let's see if I can advance this. This is just a slide that I won't go through, but it's just a nice slide to have available or to look at sometime when you're curious about the different kinds of ways in which you can get internet. It's not the different ways in which you can get broadband, but internet. Most important, it's really only fiber, which you see down in the right-hand corner, that really delivers symmetrical speeds, as I mentioned. The low orbiting satellites, 5G that you hear so much about, all of those are dependent on a robust fiber infrastructure. They're not replacements for fiber. So fiber's better. Why is fiber better, faster, reliable, symmetrical speed, which we already talked about, and affordable? Reliability is a big factor. A lot of people will say, oh, well, I pay for XYZ from Spectrum, and supposedly I get that, right? Not if you do a speed test, you don't. And remember that those speeds are always up to speeds, as you all know if you've done a speed test. So as one person likens it to, if you go to the grocery store and you pay for 10 pounds of hamburger, you don't expect to get 5, okay? I mean, it's that simple. And that's download speed. Cable and all the various, the cable and the different types of internet activities out there, or delivery services out there, as I just mentioned, cannot get that symmetrical speed. But we're talking Spectrum, and some of the incumbents don't even deliver what they promise in terms of the download speed. So reliability is a huge factor, and it exists. The lack of reliability exists here in downtown Camden and downtown Rockport. I hear it all the time, and I get speed tests and screenshots from people who are going, hello. Okay, so then fast and affordable, we just want to talk about real quick. This is a nice little slide that just kind of shows you the 25 on the left, the 25 megabits is what FCC says is okay, right? We're talking download speed. It takes to download at 25 megabits, 22 minutes, almost 23 minutes, a movie that's a 4 gigabit file. At 100, which is the minimum we believe that all networks need to be built to, it still takes you nearly 6 minutes. A gigabit, which I actually am fortunate enough to have and don't think I could live without, takes me 34 seconds. Not because I'm downloading movies fast, but because I'm working from home and doing a lot of things that, that just everyday life requires us to do these days. So that's, and the reason I have that is because Rockport has a 1.5 mile gigabit network that was installed in 2014. And I was lucky enough to live right next to it and brought it down to my residence. On the affordability, it costs a lot of money to build these networks. And that's why the big telecoms are not building them. But while it costs a lot of money, ultimately, GWI and Pioneer Broadband are two examples I put on here, are examples of how affordable the service actually is. So for those of you who have service through the incumbents and pay over $100 a month, you can look at exponentially more speed for $55 or $59.95 a month. This slide is on here only to illustrate the fact that Katahdin Broadband with Millinocket, East Millinocket, and Medway, they have a utility there, and they have a nice list here of all the various things, reasons why you need fiber. They also have a very nice website that has very short videos and some of their residents talking about how important fiber is to them just in their everyday lives. And it's a great website to take a look at if you're interested. Okay, so this slide you probably saw before, and that is the Mid-Coast Internet Coalition that formed a few months ago. Well, formed, I guess, the first of the year officially. It consists of about a dozen towns in our area. And these are the guiding principles that most of those towns that belong to the coalition have adopted. You'll note toward the bottom, it talks about symmetrical speed. Starting at 100 over 100 with the option for all residents and businesses to go up to a gigabit download and upload. Also important here is, of course, the first one, which is the nonprofit regional municipal utility that these towns believe in. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. Community ownership of the assets being important, because what's been happening now is really a shame, to put it mildly, at least in my opinion. Vermont, for example, has communication districts. Sorry, I don't recall it's their CUDs across Vermont. And basically, they have recognized that community ownership of networks is important. Just like we own the roads and we own, the government owns the railroad tracks, not individual entities. What's been happening and has happened forever in Maine is that incumbents, the incumbent private companies are given grant money to build out whatever they build out. And then at the end of the day, not only do they have a network on which they can deliver services to you from now until forever, and they didn't have to use their own capital, like in the case of the CARES Act, they then own those assets at the end of the day. So we are paying taxpayer money to have incumbent big for-profit entities own those networks. And I think that's something that our towns are really see as antithetical to the interests of our residents. Open access network means it goes hand in hand with that, which basically means that if you have an open access network, then you want multiple players to be able to play on that network. You don't have spectrum lines out here or LCI lines or just the lines for that particular company. It reduces competition. It keeps competition out. It costs more money for us as consumers. It doesn't make sense. The only thing, I'm going to grab my water. I'll pause right now just to mention the utility, which was on this slide as well. As Joan mentioned, in June, Camden and Rockport voters voted in favor of establishing the regional utility that we proposed. And that vote was 91% of those voting in Camden were in favor of it, 79% in Rockport, and 82% in Thomaston. Rockland City Council was able to do that through the city council without having to go to the voters. And the Rockland City Council voted in favor of joining the utility about a week ago. Excuse me. Yeah. So we are up and running as a legal structure, and we are working on trying to get funding. And that's where we're at today. I provided this slide to you just so that you get a feel for the fact that there are a lot of community networks across the United States. You'll get things in the mail from some of the incumbents that will tell you that community networks are dinosaurs, that they never work and they're never successful. And that's just not the case. This is the Institute for Local Self-Reliance, which tracks all the community networks. Some of these networks have been rated as the fastest, cheapest networks in the entire country, even compared to the large name telecoms and telcos and cable companies. So in Maine, there's the Down East Broadband Utility, which is Calais Baileyville, and Alexander, and soon to be, I think, some other towns. Katahdin Broadband that I mentioned earlier, Ellsworth, Sanford, Rockport, the small network that I mentioned, Islesboro, South Portland. You may have read in the paper that Searsport is in the process of doing their own network. And so this is not an exclusive list by any means, but just an example of what's going on in the state. In our region, we have the coalition, as I mentioned, that are about a dozen towns, but we have interest that has been expressed to us that goes from the Blue Hill Peninsula, Sedgwick and Brooklyn, out to Kennebec County, Western Kennebec Lakes region, down to Wiscasset and Waldoboro, all of whom have expressed interest in being part of our utility. That's a little far afield and we're not ready to go that way, or go that far. But we are definitely helping those folks and helping them to establish their own utilities, et cetera. So Axiom Technologies is the entity that we chose to do feasibility studies for us. And what they're doing is a feasibility study for right now for what we consider the core four, which is Camden, Rockport, Rockland, and Thomaston. And I have some preliminary numbers, although those numbers are not final yet. And I'm sorry, Brian and Kira, who are on the line. You haven't seen the numbers because I just got them a couple days ago and they're just not final yet, but they're going to be coming out very soon. And it gives you, just to give you an idea, it basically shows that Rockport, building a Rockport fiber to the home and to every business network will be a $3 million build. And probably doing all four of the core four towns will be about a $14 million build. So that's the scope. We also are doing, are having Axiom do feasibility studies for some of the smaller towns. Cushing, Allshead, South Thomaston are all towns that have a union have asked Axiom for a very low cost of $5,000 a town to do some feasibility for them. And the feasibility will also help those towns understand not only the cost of building the structure, but also the expected revenue that you could anticipate from take rates in the community, how much it costs to actually operate, et cetera, et cetera. We, as noted in the principal slide a while back, we have been committed to doing this without raising any taxpayer funds. So when I say that these feasibility studies will show how much it costs per town, if the utility is able to build those towns out, those towns won't pay for that. The utility will pay for that. But as you can imagine, while we can achieve some economies of scale through the utility, we have to do it in bite-sized pieces. It has to be phased. There's a lot of things that have to, go into consideration. One of the things that's being considered right now, obviously, is where our phase one build is going to be. I don't know if you guys have seen any newspaper articles about Otelco potentially coming into this area, but Otelco does have plans to build fiber. We just found this out about in June, I guess. They have plans to build fiber in Camden, Rockland, and Thomaston. So what they'll do is, the good news is they'll build fiber. And the other good news is it's at the cost that they expect to charge for their services is going to be, right in line with those numbers I showed you. Very good. But the bad news is that they will just cherry pick the downtown dense areas as everybody else does, and they won't provide universal access to everyone. And as you might recall from the principal's slide, universal access is key to what we're doing. It's fundamental to what we're doing. So we can't compete head to head with Otelco. There's just no way that the utility will be able to do that. So we had to figure out what our strategy is. Notice I did not mention Rockport. They are not building in Rockport. They claim that Rockport doesn't meet their density standards. It might also be that Rockport, they know, is totally against having them build there, as evidenced by their 1.5-mile network. And so that might, figure into the equation. In any event, we're looking at what makes sense for the utility given Otelco. So the other part of it is that Otelco, people suspect it's owned by a private equity firm. It'll come in and it'll build in those dense places. Then it will probably move out and sell to someone else. And so who knows who will ultimately own the fiber network. It could be good news, it could be bad news, who knows? All I know is that there's lots of different factors at play, and we have to be very, very nimble. Some suggest, oh, why don't you just come up with a plan, a business plan of how exactly, where you're going to build here. You can't do that, at least not at this stage, because the market forces are changing all the time, and we have to be responsive to those. So by the time we get done with these feasibility studies, in the next month or so, we're going to have 5-year pro formas, our operation costs, which we pretty much already know what they would be, build costs I mentioned, and anticipated income. So ARPA funds, the American Rescue Plan Act, has a lot of funds coming into Maine at every state, but Maine at the municipal level, the county level, and the state level. The municipal level, for example, Rockport gets about $355,000, half this year, half next year. Camden gets around $480,000, half this year, half next year. The real winners in this are the counties. Knox County gets $7.7 million, as does Waldo County. There's supposed to be only 3 types of infrastructure that are eligible for investment by the counties with these ARPA funds. And those 3 types of infrastructure are water and sewer, for which the counties in Maine have nothing to do with, and broadband. And we have encouraged the Knox County commissioners to use those funds on broadband. And they have not made a decision, but they have been disinclined to do so. Waldo County seemed to have been a little bit more receptive to spending their $7.7 million on broadband for those Waldo County towns, and apparently has recently made the decision that they're going to give $20,000 a piece to each town, totaling $300,000, which is 4% of the ARPA funds they're receiving, and is really not right. So anyway, those of us who are in the broadband arena are very unhappy with the counties right now in terms of the way it looks like it's going. And I think that's pretty true across the state of Maine. I think that the disconnect to some extent is that there are counties across the nation that actually have a lot of responsibilities for infrastructure. In Maine, that's just not the case. And so giving that same amount of population attributable funds to counties in Maine when they don't have those responsibilities as they do elsewhere in the United States is really kind of a disconnect. It's unfortunate that those funds did not go to the municipalities. There's a August 31st deadline by which we have to get in our applications to Knox County. The project funding sources, just overall stepping back, certainly include, as I said, ARPA. Then there's the Economic Development Administration. The EDA has ARPA funds that they can use, and those ARPA funds are supposed to be focused on economic development. And we are a little bit more optimistic about possibly getting some ARPA funds through the EDA, and we're certainly going to be working on that. Maine does have a group called Connect Maine, which administered grants in the past. Now they have a more robust group called the Maine Connectivity Authority, which is listed here. And they're having their first meeting from 2 to 4 this afternoon. Unfortunately, we feel that the board is kind of telecom heavy in terms of the governor's appointments and the legislature's confirmation of that board. So we'll see how that comes out. So anyway, so we have these other routes of potential funding. One that we're also focusing on is private foundations. And that's it. This is the timeline that we've developed that we are working under. And I know at the last meeting, I think one of the questions was, what can you guys do to help us? And I have a response to that today. On the economic development front with the EDA, and it would probably also be helpful at the county level, but certainly at the EDA level, one of the things we had to show is why businesses think that broadband is important to them, and how it would either help them, retain current employees or be able to expand their business or attract other employees. For example, would it make it easier for you to find talent outside of Maine in terms of applications? Does the fact that, would you be able to hire people who then would be more willing to move to the area because their kids need to have access to the educational opportunities that broadband can deliver, healthcare jobs, and how those might be enhanced. I remember a radiologist who lived on Dodge Mountain and could not do his work. He would read radiology films from, theoretically, when he was in Chicago anyway, from across the world with different time zones. And he couldn't read those because he didn't have sufficient broadband. So it really shut down his means of employment by moving to Maine. And they're no longer here. They're back in Chicago. Anyway, so if you could think for us about letters of support from businesses, whether it's in Camden, Rockport, in this region, it would be hugely, hugely helpful for us. And we need those like within the next couple of weeks, few weeks. So it's really right. The time is on us. You could send them to me, and it's Debra, Debra .hall, HALL, @midcoast.com. Or send them to John, he'll get them to me, whatever, or Rich Anderson. Thank you. Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much. Can you hear? Okay. Do you have a need for a 501c3 to enter the funding collection that you seem to have assembled to get funds?
Yeah. We are incorporated as a 501c4. And the reason we did that is because of all that's going on in Congress and in the state legislature. We really needed to be able to lobby. And so we had more lobbying capability by being a 501c4. And we as an organization will be tax exempt, but we're in the process of creating a 501c3 sister organization that will allow us to give, for tax exempt donations too. And that can be done, we can do that within a couple of days. So that shouldn't hold anybody up who might otherwise think about contributing, because since we've got plenty of lawyers involved in the group, we can get it done fast.
It's on. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm here to monitor the Zoom room here. And Adam Lackman from Senator King's office just commented that there is also $130 million or more coming to the state of Maine from the American Rescue Plan for Broadband in the form of the $10 billion Capital Projects Fund, and adds that if the current infrastructure bill gets signed into law, passed this week by the Senate, Maine could see an additional $300 million for broadband and digital equity efforts.
Yeah, that's great. And thank you, Adam, for mentioning that. We're thankful that that money is coming into the state of Maine. We were hoping that that legislation, and it's not Adam's fault, we were hoping that that legislation might prefer municipal networks. It doesn't. Although it certainly makes them eligible for funding. Unfortunately, as I mentioned, we have a sort of a legacy history here in Maine of giving a lot of that funding out to the telecoms and the cable companies instead of to the municipal networks. Well, I mean, in fairness, the municipal networks didn't really exist much before, and now they're coming in, coming online. But we have a lot of debate and tug of war at the Augusta level between the telecoms and the muni networks.
Debra, is if a telco goes into a high density area and builds out cable, then the municipal utility, would you install duplicate cable in those areas, or would you, how does that work? I mean, is there sort of a race here as to who gets
Yeah.
going fast, quicker?
There, that's called overbuilding. That's called overbuilding, and in most industries, it would be regarded as competition. And what's wrong with competition? People in this industry say overbuilding like it's a bad thing. I think that the utility can compete with the large cable companies and telecoms because they don't install fiber to the home or fiber to the business. They install cable. They install fiber to the node. And then from the node, it goes on coax to the home. So it's like going down a freeway and then hitting a dirt road. So we can compete, we think, on the technology and on the price, if people pay attention to that. What we can't compete against is the telco situation that I mentioned, where you actually have fiber to the home versus the utility doing the same thing. So does that answer your question? It depends on if it's a telecom that's putting in cable versus another fiber provider, which is actually providing fiber to the home, but still cherry picking.
I have a question.
Hold it like this.
There. And you get not only the cable, but you also get your television and your telephone. Would yours be only the internet, or does it include the other aspects as well?
That raises a very good point that I should have raised. And, when we were looking at the guiding principles, what we're doing is building the road, right? And having taxpayers own the road. And then what the utility will do is contract with ISPs or internet service providers to actually deliver the service. So remember the slide that showed GWI and Pioneer Broadband? GWI, for example, does not do TV services because it's a dying industry because everything's going to streaming. Pioneer Broadband, on the other hand, they do offer TV services. So the answer to your question is it depends on which ISPs deliver services on the utilities network. And some will probably offer, TV and others might not, on the theory that once you have sufficient bandwidth coming into your home or your business, you can stream anything for a lot less than cable.
Okay, am I on the mic now? I have another comment from the Zoom from Adam Lackman. Municipal applicants are considered equal to private providers in terms of eligibility. No restrictions on munis. It also creates a priority for faster speed builds, in other words, fiber, and build outs to areas of high poverty. Also, for the first time ever with broadband funding, there includes a requirement for anyone taking funds from the program to offer a low-cost option.
Yep.
Related to that response, you talked about several towns and your involvement with broadband service. Does that extend to rural communities as well?
Well, first off, I think we're all rural here in Maine, but there's degrees of rural, right? And I take your point. What we are all about in this coalition is about bringing it to the most unserved places. So, for example, Cushing is a member of our coalition. We work with Searsmont, Freedom, some of the places when I mentioned the Western Kennebec Lakes. There's a lot of those towns that are basically completely underserved or unserved, even under today's definitions of 25.3. So yeah, we're all about bringing it to all of those communities. The core four that you see being Camden, Rockport, Thomaston, and Rockland, you have to have some density and you have to have that revenue that we can build up, which is why we've started with those four towns in large part. But we will expand.
What will be the way of stringing out the utility? Will it be overhead on utility poles, or will it be underground?
It will be mostly aerial on the utility poles, and that's where the delays, a lot of delays and cost in the whole installation come into play, because it's called make ready, and those make ready costs can be as much as 50% of the build. So it's huge, unfortunately, in Maine, having to do the aerial installation. Having said that, we do have some communities that have underground utilities, and we're talking about the way in which to address those utilities in a very efficient and low-cost manner. Yeah, Rockport, in fact, we're trying to sell our current home, and we bought another home a year ago in a place that has the underground utilities. So yeah, it's near and dear to my heart. I mean, you can go into a community and it can cost, take this one that I'm thinking about, it could cost 45 homeowners 6 figures to put in conduit. On the other hand, there are other things that you can do, like ditch witch, the fiber, just under the surface of the ground and things like that. Because you got to remember, with fiber, there's no electricity running through it. It's just pulses of light. So you can literally hold it in your hand. It's very different than, electric cable or whatever.
Deborah, you mentioned micro trenching as an alternative method to aerial fiber. Is that still an option for some communities?
Certainly something that we're taking a look at. The micro trenching requires some expensive equipment, either purchasing or access to that equipment. And the ditch witching kind of example that I mentioned is a little bit different than that. It's not as sophisticated as the micro trenching, but we're looking at micro trenching for sure.
This is Reuben Brown. I had experience 40 years ago with the cable TV movement, and I was really riding in the coattails of that with small hydroelectric development. The issue has to do with, do you have a constituency of other municipalities across the country organized in any way for this purpose?
For the municipal network
Yes.
purpose, yeah. The Institute of Local Self-Reliance, the slide that showed the 600 communities, they're a great resource for organizing. So, for example, we had a situation where Treasury had come out with some interim rules with respect to the ARPA funds, suggesting that you could only use those municipal and county ARPA funds for purposes of building in the 25/3 areas, which would be, I mean, not very many places really have under 25/3, but they're still unserved. So anyway, we participated with them, the cities of San Antonio, all over the country, in a White House meeting to try to urge them to change that, and they did. So Yeah, there is that national group, and there's the League of Municipalities, or League of Cities, whatever, Adam could tell me the right name, that is active with that group. And we are actually trying to put together a state group here in Maine. I'm trying to put that together because when we need to lobby Augusta on something, I have a great list of municipal, town managers and select boards and people who are trying to get the municipal networks going. But we want to, we want to make that more of an official group.